V'yidaber Shemo Shaleimor. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Heshiv es Chamosi, Mi'al Bnei Yisrael. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, grandson of Aaron HaKohen, diffused my wrath, Mi'al Bnei Yisrael. The Kanos Kinosi, when he avenged my vengeance, B'sochim in the midst. And therefore I did not consume the Bnei Yisrael with my wrath. Why? With my wrath. Because he assumed my wrath, he says, he diffused my wrath in Israel, because he avenged my vengeance in their midst. Because what he could not tolerate was what I could not tolerate. He totally internalized the cause why I would have had the wrath. So since he expended that same wrath, that's why I did not consume the Jewish people with my wrath. We find at the end of Parshas Balak, those two with Zimri and Cosby. Zimri was the Nasi of the tribe of Shimon. Cosby was a Midianite princess. And they were publicly cohabiting, which was considered Chil Hashem at the most advanced level, extreme level. Immediately, what was there? There was a Magefo. There was a plague. 24,000 people died in that plague. Bilam, Rashi cites the Midrash in last week's Parsha, says, although I didn't succeed in cursing them, because during the days that I wanted to curse them, the moment that God becomes angry, God withheld his anger. So therefore he couldn't curse Klal Yisrael. Not only couldn't curse, he blessed them, but he says, one thing I can tell you, one thing he will not tolerate is licentiousness. And if they go and cross that line, it's over. They will be destroyed. And he was right. If not for Balak's intervention to expand the wrath of Hashem through his zealotry, Klal Yisrael would have been consumed. We've been destroyed. It's only because Kino was Kinosi, because he avenged my vengeance, and he reacted due to the Chil Hashem. That's the reason why my wrath was quelled, because he was Kinosi. Okay? Let's take a look in Rashi. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Now, who is Elazar? Elazar was the son of Aaron, who became his father's successor after he passed away. Who is Elazar's wife? Elazar's wife, he married one of Yisro's daughters. So his father was an idolater. I mean, he became a Baal Tshuva, but he's an idolater. Ben Aaron. So the Torah identified as Ben Elazar. Normally, the Torah does not trace the lineage, the pedigree back more than one generation. But in regard to Pinchas, it traces it all the way back to Aaron HaKohen. Now, why? So Rashi cites the Chazal. The Shvatim, they were disgracing Pinchas, and they criticized him very strongly. Heresim ben Puti zeh. Have you seen this Ben Puti? Referred to Ben Putiel. Puti. One of Yisro's names was Putiel. This Ben Puti, his grandfather used to fatten calves for idolatry. V'horag Nosi Shed Yisrael, and he had the audacity that he killed one of the princes of one of the tribes. Therefore, the Torah traced this pedigree to Aaron HaKohen, that Aaron had the most prestigious pedigree. So therefore, that they should see it through a proper lens, that what Pinchas did, it wasn't due to his background that he comes from, this idolater, but rather he comes from this special pedigree, which is Aaron. So there's a number of questions here, difficulties. A person is about to step off the curb, and a homeless person goes and grabs the person by his neck and pulls him back, that he should not be run over the bus and he'd be crushed to death. Does the person have a claim? Where do you have the audacity to pull me away from the front of the bus? I mean, is it considered even the man has to be insane? Is that somehow you're disgracing me? Factually, Hashem says there was a plague. 24,000 Jews died in this plague, and the only thing that stopped the plague was Pinchas' zealotry, because he cannot tolerate the Chil Hashem. And they said, where does this man have the chutzpah? So they disgraced him. How does he have a right? His grandfather fattened calves for idolatry. Where does he have the audacity to kill a prince? What do you mean? If he wouldn't have killed this prince, regardless what his status was, there'd be no Jewish people. So what's the basis for the criticism? Okay, that's number one difficulty, which is an obvious difficulty. But now that we hear he's Ben Aaron, we understand, we don't see it that way anymore. He had the right, he went toe-to-toe with Zimri, because he has a pedigree which surpasses the pedigree of Zimri ben Sogel, the prince of Shimon. Just a simple understanding. Discuss this in a minute. When Pinchas killed Zimri, very often when something happens, the Jews have to recognize, to be considered appropriate tshuva, they have to see it through the right lens, and they have to see it correctly. If they saw Pinchas, the reason why he was able to do what he did is because he was Ben Puti, because he has this characteristic of Yisro, who was initially an idolater. You understand? If that's the case, immediately that distracts you. That means it wasn't only because it was a Chil Hashem. A Chil Hashem should actually be sufficient reason, whoever you are, you stop it immediately at all costs. And pedigree plays no role. That's the way if they would have seen it that way, it's not a problem. Pedigree plays no role. It's a Chil Hashem at this level is taking place. You have to stop it no matter what, because Hashem is being desecrated at this level. But let's say they see it, meaning it wasn't enough of a reason for them to intervene. Because you see, Pinchas did it. You know why Pinchas did it? Because his grandfather was somebody who fattened calves for idolatry from the maternal side. I mean, they didn't appreciate that Chil Hashem was enough reason that every one of them should have done it. You know something? You're saying because he has this gangster background, he has this corrupted pedigree in his background, therefore he was able to do it. Chil Hashem wasn't enough a reason to appreciate why he did it. The only way they were able to appreciate it was because Chil Hashem, meaning you had to clean that lens, is because he was Ben Aaron. Now that he's Ben Aaron, we don't have this distraction any longer. We can appreciate it was because of Chil Hashem. Why did Pinchas do it? Because he appreciated the Chil Hashem. Now that he appreciated, now we opened our eyes. I'll give you an example. You know, the Shlomo refers to the Gedolei Yisrael as Eini Ha'am. The Torah leaders are the eyes of the people. Now, why are they referred to the eyes of the people? So the Malbim, in his commentary, writes that when Hashem created the human being, why were the eyes put on the highest part of the body? Why? Because if you want to maximize on the ability to see, it should be as high as possible, because if it's lower down, you don't have the same distance sight to see at a distance. So Hashem puts the eyes on the upper part of the body to maximize on one side. What Gedolei Yisrael see, what Torah leaders see, the average person doesn't see. Why? They don't have the background, they don't have the ability to process, they don't have the siyata d'shmayo to be able to see things through that proper lens, or lens that's clear enough. The Klaus, the Gedolim, the Torah leaders, they are the Einei Yisrael. They're the eyes of the people. They are on the way, they're way up there. And because they're way up there, they see from the highest precipice, they are able to see it. Therefore, they have understanding which we don't understand. If you're Ben Aaron, you have that level of pedigree, which surpassed the pedigree of Zimri. If that's the case, Zimri is definitely dead wrong, as they say. What he did is unacceptable. This is a Chil Hashem par excellence at the most extreme level. Only through that did they appreciate the Chil Hashem that's taking place. And because Klal Yisrael appreciated the Chil Hashem, the act of zealotry of Pinchas was to eradicate and to stop this Chil Hashem. Therefore, the plague stopped. They had to somehow appreciate what happened, why it happened. If they wouldn't appreciate it, and they would have had a claim, how did he do it? They wouldn't appreciate the Chil Hashem, because Chil Hashem should be enough reason that everybody should have done it. So if they would have been distracted that he did it because he had this corrupted character, because of Yisro, it would have been a problem. They didn't appreciate it fully because of Chil Hashem. But now that he has the pedigree of Aaron, because he sees it clearly, this is the real thing. What happened is appropriate, and we should have done it. Except we didn't have the capacity that he had, that he appreciated the Chil Hashem, so we see it through his eyes. Therefore, the plague was stopped because of that. Because he was Ben Aaron. They didn't have that distraction to have a full appreciation. It was purely Chil Hashem, why it happened, and we appreciated Chil Hashem. That's why the wrath of Hashem was quelled. What I'm saying now, I said I never said before, and I always used to say that, people have a conscience. And to be able to live with your conscience, we have to frame it a certain way, because a person cannot live with guilt. That's a reality. I'll give you an example. The Gemara says in Kedushin that if a person is a one-time offender, it's easier to do tshuva. Why is it easier to do tshuva? Because we know that we're not perfect. We failed. And as Rabbeinu Yonah writes in the Shari Tshuva, even if a person fails and he does it deliberately, he's not held, even though there's accountability, but it's not to such a degree. Why? Because the person was unaware that he was vulnerable to this particular act. So therefore, there's a certain degree of inadvertency, because you weren't ready for it, so to say. But if you're ready, cross that line once, and you understand you're vulnerable, you should have taken precautions. Understanding your vulnerability. So the question is, why don't you take a precaution? See, if you cross the line a second time, the Rabbeinu writes in Shari Tshuva, the liability, the culpability account is much more serious. Because now that you know you're vulnerable, how did you cross the line a second time? You should have taken every precaution not to cross that line. Therefore, there's greater culpability the second time. This is Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Tshuva. The first time you sin, it's easy to do tshuva. Why? Because you recognize the wrong you did, and you could face it. Why could you face it? Because you weren't ready for it. But let's say you're ready, know you're vulnerable, and you want more of it. So now you know it's wrong, and you know you're vulnerable. Why don't you take a precaution? Because the answer is because you want to go back to where you went. So it says, "Ava v'shana naslo keheter." The moment you become a second-time offender, it becomes permitted to you. You see it through a positive light. Why? And that's the way it is. The first time you cross the line, it's easy to do tshuva. The second time, it's not so easy to do tshuva. Because naslo keheter. Because it's become permitted to you. Okay? Why? So the question, why does it become permitted? Because if you know it's wrong, how do you go back the second time? Its answer is because somehow, because you're instant going there, you frame it through a lens that it's not so terrible. And somehow in your mind, you rationalize and you process it, it's not so extreme. The first time you could see it as extreme as you want. Of course, there's no conscience you have to deal with. But if you cross the line a second time, you have to deal with your conscience. How do you do with your conscience? You have to say, well, it's not so terrible. I could do tshuva on Yom Kippur. Whatever it is, there's always, you have to see it to minimize the level of wrongness the second time. Now, the Chil Hashem that took place with Zimri, every Jew should have responded and should have reacted no different than Pinchas. Why didn't they? And this is a question should be gnawing at every Jew's mind. And you have many Jews, special Jews. How did they remain silent and let this happen? You know, there's a guilt issue. You know what the answer is? If Pinchas could do, why did you do it? So they have to look for a reason why he could and we can't. You know why? Because to be able to do such an act, you have to have a gangster background. You have to have a corrupted character to be able to do that. Otherwise, he can't do it. It's not Pinchas did more better than we did. Because Pinchas comes from a background that his grandfather found calves for idolatry. Therefore, he was able to do what we couldn't do it. So this takes the edge off the guilt. You understand? That's why the Torah says no. The reason why Pinchas did it, because it's not because he had a corrupted background. He did it because he appreciated the Chil Hashem. And why was he able to appreciate the Chil Hashem? Because he's Ben Aaron. So the moment he's Ben Aaron, he's the grandfather's Aaron, he has a pedigree which surpasses Zimri's pedigree. If that's the case, the guilt is taken off of them. Why is the guilt taken off of them? You know why he could do it? We don't have the pedigree Pinchas had. Therefore, he could respond to that. We don't have that pedigree. So he could go toe-to-toe with Zimri. We're not. They only need something to take off to soothe their conscience. If Pinchas, they see like themselves, they got a problem. Why did he do? Why did we do it? Witnessing such Chil Hashem. So we need an answer. There's one of two answers. Either because he has a corrupted character, because he comes from an idolater. So the Torah says, no, it's the wrong way for them to see it. It's because his pedigree surpasses Pinchas, Zimri's, therefore he could do it. But the moment they see it through that lens, automatically they're off the hook. They'd have to deal with their conscience anymore. He could do something that we could do, that we can't do because he's more than we are. Before they saw him, he was less than we are. Now they see him, he's more than we are. That's what he said until now. But now I'm saying even more than that. For them not to be culpable, they have to see it through the lens of Chil Hashem. They have to appreciate the Chil Hashem. If they don't appreciate, something, the play continues. Now that they don't attribute it to the wrong thing, but it's only Pinchas was able to appreciate the Chil Hashem because of who he was. Therefore, now they appreciate why what was taking place, and they're able to recognize how wrong this behavior was, and therefore that's the reason why the plague ceased. Chazal tell us that if you go to an action for the sake of Kid Hashem, and you know you're going to die, and you're going to die, that's the only time you have a chance Hashem should perform a miracle on your behalf. But if you're not going for that reason, and you believe you're going to do it, and Hashem will perform the miracle, you coming out alive, Hashem will not perform the miracle. What's the rationale? But factually, you're going to stop Chil Hashem. Why wouldn't God perform a miracle for you? It's only when you go to die, that's when you have a chance Hashem perform the miracle. Not always, but that's when you have a chance. Why? Chil Hashem, there's nothing more extreme than Chil Hashem. Rabbi Akiva was one of the Asur Hugei Malchus. He was the most advanced Talmud Chacham among all the 10 of them. And there was a decree, you're not permitted to teach Torah publicly. It's called Shas Hashmad. He taught. He knew they would take his life. Didn't make a difference. Rabbi Akiva. Do you know what it means, Rabbi Akiva? If he dies now, he's killed now, the Torah that he's denying Klal Yisrael till the end of time is never going to be revealed. That's how great Rabbi Akiva was. But you want to know something? Kiddush Hashem and Chil Hashem is at such a level, it's more important than all the Torah that Rabbi Akiva was able to disseminate. That's the ultimate. Kiddush Hashem and Chil Hashem is the worst. You have to give your life for the sake of sanctification of Hashem's name. If a person values his life, I'm going to stop the Chil Hashem to do Kiddush Hashem. If you appreciate what Chil Hashem is, you go to give your life. That you have this holdback, that I'm not going to die because Hashem will perform the miracle, that is even part of the equation is a problem. That means you don't appreciate what Chil Hashem is. Chil Hashem means if there's Chil Hashem, your life is worthless. If my life is worthless, if I have to live with Chil Hashem, my life is worthless, I got to die. So why aren't you going to die? Because you don't fully appreciate what Chil Hashem is. Because if you really appreciate it and internalize it to your core, I'm going to die. So not going to die means you don't fully appreciate the Chil Hashem. So it's only the person who's going to die to stop the Chil Hashem and to sanctify his name, to show my life is worthless. If Chil Hashem takes place, that person merits the miracle because only he appreciates what that Chil Hashem truly is. Chaim HaKadosh says, because of what Akiva had done, till today, we still cull the fruits of his Kiddush Hashem. Till today, that suppresses prosecution against Klal Yisrael because of Akiva's action. That although he knew he was who he was, but he says, I waited for this moment. Despite of his greatness, he gave his life, and the way he was tortured before they killed him, he died. That schus, whenever there's prosecution against Klal Yisrael, that schus count as that prosecution. That's how great that act was. So why did Hashem perform the miracle? The answer is no, because we need that schus till the end of time to always counter the prosecution against Klal Yisrael.